Bruce Lee was told, "You're not a real fighter." 10 seconds later, it was one of those halls where tradition lived in the air. Wooden floors worn smooth by decades of ritual steps. Calligraphy on the walls. Men who had spent their entire lives inside systems that promised certainty. Belts, titles, lineage, hierarchy. Everything had a place, and everyone knew where they stood. Everyone except Bruce Lee. He wasn't dressed like them. No uniform, no symbols of rank stitched to his chest. Just a simple shirt clinging to a lean frame that looked unimpressive to men who worshipped size and structure. To them, he looked like an outsider who hadn't earned the right to speak. He had been invited as a courtesy, nothing more. At the front of the room stood the traditional master, a man whose reputation rested on generations. He taught forms that had not changed in decades. His students repeated movements with precision, but without question. He believed mastery meant preservation, that truth lived in the past, not in adaptation. He looked at Bruce Lee for a long moment, long enough to make the silence uncomfortable. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, a surgical one. "So," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "this is Bruce Lee." A pause. The kind that invites judgment. "I've heard many things about you," the master continued. "Fast hands, movie tricks, flashy movements." He tilted his head slightly. "But tell me something." Bruce Lee said nothing. The master stepped forward. "What you do? It isn't real fighting." A few people shifted in their seats. "You borrow techniques," the master went on. "You mix styles. You break rules that exist for a reason." His voice hardened. "That makes you a performer, not a fighter." Then, he delivered the line that sealed the room against Bruce. "Without a system, you have nothing." Laughter broke out. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. Enough for the sound to roll across the hall like a wave. Some laughed because they agreed. Some because it was safer to laugh than to stay silent. Others because authority had given them permission. Bruce Lee stood there, unmoving. This was the moment people expected a reaction. A defense, an argument, a speech about philosophy or freedom or evolution. He gave them none. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He didn't even shift his weight. The laughter faded slowly, awkwardly, like a fire running out of oxygen. The master raised an eyebrow. "Nothing to say?" Bruce Lee looked at him, calm, focused, almost distant. "No." He said that single word. Confused them. The master exhaled through his nose, amused. "Then perhaps you'll listen," he said. "What you practice would fail against a real fighter, against discipline, against tradition." He turned slightly toward his students, gesturing with confidence. "What survives is structure. What endures is lineage. Improvisation is chaos." More nods. More quiet agreement. Bruce Lee still didn't move. Inside his mind, something very different was happening. He had heard this before. Not once, not twice. His entire life had been an argument against rooms like this, against men who believed truth could be frozen in time, against systems that confused repetition with understanding. He thought of the hours alone, the injuries, the notebooks filled with crossed-out ideas, the nights questioning everything he had been taught, the moments when he realized that copying the past was the fastest way to become irrelevant. He also knew something else. Words would not survive in this room. Demonstration would. The master took a step back, confidence intact. "If you ever wish to learn real combat," he said dismissively, "you're welcome to start from the beginning." That was when Bruce Lee finally moved. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just one step forward. The room leaned in without realizing it. Bruce Lee met the master's eyes. His voice was quiet, almost respectful. "May I show you something?" he asked. The master hesitated just for a fraction of a second. Long enough to register, but not long enough to stop himself from agreeing. "A mistake." "Very well," the master said. But make it quick. Bruce Lee nodded. He removed his shoes. The sound of them touching the floor was soft, but somehow it echoed. People shifted. Someone whispered. Someone else leaned forward. No one laughed now. Bruce Lee positioned himself a few steps away from the master. No stance that looked familiar. No textbook posture. Just balance. Just readiness. The master gestured impatiently. Go on. Bruce Lee exhaled. And in that exhale, the room crossed a threshold it could never uncross. Not yet. Not fully. But something had already changed, and the people in that hall were about to understand why silence, when chosen deliberately, is far more dangerous than any argument. Bruce Lee didn't rush. That was the first lesson, though no one in the room recognized it yet. In a world obsessed with proving itself quickly, restraint looks like weakness. In truth, restraint is awareness choosing its moment. He stood there, feet light against the wooden floor, eyes steady, breathing slow. Not the shallow breath of nerves, but the deep, quiet rhythm of someone fully present. The kind of breath that tells the body there is no fear, only timing. The master watched him with thinly veiled impatience. He had seen countless challenges over the years. Young men fueled by ego, older men desperate to reclaim relevance. They all shared one flaw. They needed to win immediately. Bruce Lee needed nothing. Begin, the master said, waving a hand as if dismissing a child. Bruce Lee didn't attack. Instead, he shifted his weight by a fraction, barely noticeable. Yet, in that micro-movement was a truth most fighters never learn. Power begins before motion. Intent arrives first. The body simply follows. The master frowned. Is this part of your act? He asked. Bruce Lee tilted his head slightly. I'm listening, he replied. That answer unsettled the room. Listening in a confrontation? Yes. Because a wise fighter understands that every opponent reveals themselves long before they strike. In posture, in breath, in impatience. The master stepped forward, irritation rising. Enough, he said. If you believe your methods work, show us. Bruce Lee nodded once. What happened next did not look dramatic. There was no flying kick, no spinning technique, no theatrical flourish. There was a step, a hand, and silence. Bruce Lee moved so economically that many eyes failed to register the sequence. One moment he was standing still. The next, his palm rested inches from the master's chest. Fingers relaxed, elbow aligned, body rooted. The master froze. Not because he chose to, but because his nervous system had made the decision for him. Every instinct screamed danger. The room held its breath. Bruce Lee's hand did not strike. It hovered, calm, controlled, close enough that everyone understood what restraint truly meant. He could have ended it there. Everyone knew it, including the master. This, Bruce Lee said softly, is not an attack. His eyes never left the master's face. It's an arrival. A murmur rippled through the hall. The master tried to move. His body refused, not paralyzed, but trapped by realization. He had overcommit, leaned forward, assumed dominance, and in doing so he had given everything away. Bruce Lee withdrew his hand and stepped back. Only then did the master regain full movement. He swallowed. Bruce Lee spoke again. Not louder, not sharper, just clear. A system teaches you answers, he said. Life asks different questions every day. Silence pressed down on the room, heavier than the laughter had been earlier. The master's face flushed. Anger replaced confidence. You mock tradition, he said. You mock everything that came before you. Bruce Lee shook his head slowly. I respect tradition, he said, but I don't worship it. He looked around the room now, addressing everyone, not just the master. Tradition should be a guide, he continued, not a cage. A few heads lifted, a few minds opened, just enough to let doubt in. Bruce Lee returned his gaze to the master. If water stays still, he said, it rots. If it flows, it survives. The room felt different now, heavier, sharper, as if something invisible had been cut away. Bruce Lee bowed slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. I came here to learn, he said. And today I did. With that, he stepped back fully, signaling the end. No applause followed. No laughter. No cheers. Just silence. Because the most unsettling thing for those who cling to certainty is witnessing someone who no longer needs it. The silence did not break. Thickened. People often think silence is empty. It isn't. Silence is a mirror. And in that hall, every man was suddenly staring at himself. The master stood frozen, not by fear now, but by something far more dangerous to authority. Doubt. Not doubt about Bruce Lee. Doubt about himself. He had built his life on certainty. On the belief that mastery was something you inherited, not something you questioned. That respect flowed downward from titles and lineage. That order was proof of truth. And yet, in less than a minute, a man without a uniform had dismantled all of it without raising his voice or throwing a single strike. The master straightened his robe, attempting to restore the image. You speak well, he said, choosing his words carefully now. But words and movements are different from real combat. Bruce Lee listened. That was another lesson unfolding quietly. Wisdom does not interrupt ignorance. It allows it to finish speaking. Real combat, the master continued, is pressure, pain, consequence. Bruce Lee nodded once. Then let there be pressure. A ripple ran through the room. The master hesitated. He hadn't expected that. He had hoped the moment would end politely, that Bruce Lee would retreat, satisfied with his demonstration, and that the balance of power would return to where it belonged. But Bruce Lee wasn't there to win a room. He was there to reveal a truth. They cleared a space. Students pulled back instinctively, creating a circle. No rules were spoken because rules only exist when people agree on the same illusion. The master took his stance. Formal, familiar. Every movement announced discipline. Bruce Lee stood opposite him. No stance. No announcement. One of the students whispered, "He doesn't even look ready." That whisper revealed the third lesson. People mistake readiness for appearance. They confuse preparation with posture. The master attacked first. Fast, sharp, precise. Years of repetition poured into a single forward motion. The kind of strike designed to overwhelm before thought could interfere. Bruce Lee moved. Not away, not into it, through it. He shifted inside the line of attack, not faster than the strike, but earlier than it. Timing beat speed. Awareness beat force. His body aligned, his structure intact, his balance unbroken. A short movement, a simple redirection. The master's strength had nowhere to go. His own momentum betrayed him. He stumbled, barely regaining footing. The room gasped again, but this time it was different. This was no longer curiosity. It was recognition. Bruce Lee stepped back as always. He did not pursue. That restraint was the fourth lesson, one few ever learn. The goal of skill is not domination, but choice. When you can end something and choose not to, you are free. The master breathed heavily now. Not from exhaustion, but from something worse. His system had not failed him before. Not like this, not in front of witnesses. He attacked again, this time with anger. Anger sharpens intent but dulls perception. It narrows vision. It shortens time. And it always arrives carrying the seed of its own defeat. Bruce Lee met it with calm. A parry, a step, a brief contact so light it seemed almost gentle. Yet the master felt it immediately, a shock that traveled through structure rather than flesh. He stopped. He knew if Bruce Lee had struck with force, the consequences would have been irreversible. The master lowered his hand slowly. The room did not cheer. Couldn't. This wasn't victory. This was exposure. Bruce Lee spoke, not to claim triumph, but to close the wound that pride had opened. When you cling to a system, he said, you defend it even when it no longer serves you. He looked around the circle. But when you understand principles, he continued, you can let go without fear. He turned back to the master. You believed I had no system, Bruce Lee said. That was true. A pause. But I have understanding. That was the fifth lesson. The one that lingers longest. Systems give comfort. Understanding gives freedom. Bruce Lee bowed again, deeper this time. Not to the master's authority, but to his humanity. I don't wish to replace your way, he said. Only to remind you that truth doesn't belong to the past. The master said nothing because some realizations arrive too late for words. Bruce Lee put his shoes back on. That simple act felt louder than any applause. As he walked toward the exit, no one laughed. No one spoke. No one stopped him. They didn't need to. Each man in that room had been given something far heavier than entertainment. A question. And the most difficult lesson of all echoed behind him as the door closed. Growth begins the moment you stop defending who you were. Bruce Lee did not look back. That too was deliberate. Many people believe wisdom announces itself, that it waits for acknowledgement, that it needs witnesses to feel complete. Bruce Lee knew better. True understanding does not linger to be validated. It moves forward, quietly, reshaping the world behind it. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, lighter, as if leaving that hall meant stepping out of a sealed container of old ideas. Bruce Lee inhaled deeply, not in relief, in acceptance. He understood something most people learn too late in life. When you challenge a system, you are not merely questioned. You are tested, mocked, resisted, and misrepresented. Not because you are wrong, but because you are unfamiliar, and unfamiliar truths feel dangerous to those who built their identity around certainty. That night stayed with him, not as triumph but as confirmation. In the days that followed, word spread. Slowly at first, distorted by ego and pride. Some said Bruce Lee had been disrespectful. Others claimed the master had gone easy on him. A few insisted it proved nothing at all. Bruce Lee welcomed none of those narratives because he was no longer interested in winning arguments. He was interested in refining reality. This was the turning point few ever notice. The moment after confrontation, when applause fades and loneliness begins. When you realize that being right often costs more than being wrong. Friends drift, doors close, invitations stop arriving. Bruce Lee accepted the cost. A lesser man might have softened his message, compromised his ideas to fit rooms like that one, learned how to speak just enough truth to remain welcome. Bruce Lee chose the harder path. He chose solitude. That choice carried a lesson many fear. Growth often isolates before it connects. When you outgrow a room, the room will not applaud your departure. He trained hard after that night, not to prove himself, but to remove even the smallest doubt from his own mind. He questioned every movement, every belief, every habit. He wrote obsessively, tested relentlessly, discarded what no longer worked, even if it had once saved him. And here lies one of the most important life lessons hidden beneath the story. Loyalty to truth must always outrank loyalty to tradition, including your own past traditions. Bruce Lee understood that stagnation does not announce itself as failure. It disguises itself as comfort. People from the hall would later claim they had always supported innovation, that they had seen his brilliance early. This too was expected. When truth becomes successful, many rush to claim they were never against it. Bruce Lee did not correct them. He had learned that wisdom does not waste energy arguing with rewritten memories. Instead, he built something new. Not a style, not a system, not a doctrine, a way of thinking. He taught his students something far more dangerous than techniques. He taught them how to think independently, how to question authority without becoming arrogant, how to remain humble without becoming small. He warned them often that certainty is seductive, that the moment you believe you have arrived, you stop moving. And when movement stops, decay begins. Absorb what is useful, he told them. Discard what is not. That sentence carried the echo of that hall, of the laughter, of the master's certainty, of the moment silence replaced noise. Another lesson emerges here, one that transcends combat entirely. Your greatest opponents will rarely defeat you, but your unwillingness to evolve will. Years later, when Bruce Lee's name became legend, when his ideas spread far beyond any single room, few remembered that night. Fewer still understood it. But Bruce Lee remembered, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Because opposition had clarified his path. Mockery had sharpened his resolve. Silence had taught him restraint. And perhaps the most powerful lesson of all remained unspoken, yet unmistakable. You do not need to convince the world when your life becomes the evidence. Bruce Lee never returned to that hall. He didn't need to. He had already stepped beyond it. And the men who once laughed were left with something far more uncomfortable than defeat. They were left with the memory of a moment when truth stood quietly in front of them and walked away untouched. If you want, next we can turn this into a high-retention YouTube narration script. Sharpen the hook for algorithm impact or adapt the ending for a controversial comment bait closer that explodes engagement. Just tell me how you want to use it. Years later, when people spoke about Bruce Lee, they spoke about speed, about power, about philosophy, about a man who seemed ahead of his time. Very few spoke about the price, but that room never left him. Because that night taught him the final lesson, the one that closes every true journey. The world rarely recognizes truth when it first appears. It laughs at it. It labels it fake. It demands it wear familiar clothes so it can feel safe again. Bruce Lee refused. He understood that being misunderstood was not a flaw in the path, but proof that he was walking ahead of it. From that moment on, he stopped trying to be accepted by systems that survived by repeating themselves. He stopped explaining himself to people who only listened in order to defend what they already believed. He stopped shrinking his ideas to fit rooms built for smaller thoughts. Instead, he became something far more dangerous than a fighter. He became independent. And independence always threatens those who profit from obedience. The traditional master returned to his students that day with his authority intact on the surface. Classes continued. Forms were practiced. Titles were preserved. But something invisible had cracked. Because once a question enters the mind, it does not leave quietly. Some students stayed. Some left. History always forgets the names of those who stayed comfortable. It remembers the ones who walked away. Bruce Lee walked alone for a long time. Long enough to refine his thinking. Long enough to strip away illusion. Long enough to realize that mastery is not about collecting techniques, but about removing what is unnecessary. He once said that knowledge adds, but wisdom subtracts. That subtraction began in that hall. The laughter had been real. The dismissal had been real. The rejection had been real. So was the clarity that followed. And here lies the final life lesson, the one that outlives every fight, every style, every system. When you are laughed at for speaking the truth, do not argue. Do not beg for understanding. Do not harden your heart. Refine yourself until your existence becomes the answer. Bruce Lee did not defeat that room. He outgrew it. And that is why, decades later, his name is still spoken while the systems that mocked him remain frozen in time. Teaching echoes instead of understanding. The room laughed once. History did not.